Hey, what's up everybody? In this crash course tutorial for Shadows of Esteren by Studio Agate, I'm going to go over everything you need to know to cast magic as a Demorthen. Let's get into it.
Cyberpunk Uncensored.
All right, now before I get into how to cast magic as a Demorthen and using Ogamic stones and all that sort of stuff, let me first show off a little bit of artwork. You know how much I love the artwork of Shadows of Esteren. It's just amazing. Studio Agate goes all out. They even have an art book that has like most of the artwork from all the different releases that they've had because it is that awesome. They've got to showcase it. But check it out here. Here's a typical Demorthen. A Demorthen is kind of like a druid character. They're the magic users of Shadows of Esteren. They kind of pull the energy from nature and from themselves. All living things have this energy, this Rindas, it's called. But this is a typical Demorthen. You can see very druid-like. But I wanted to show it off because I also wanted to show some Morkales, which are what happens to a Demorthen when they become self-serving and kind of turn a bit evil and selfish, if you will. But yeah, I just wanted to show that off, and I do want to mention I go into more details of Demorthens and all those options and ways to play them, and the way that the history works, and where the magic came from, and all that sort of stuff in the deep dive on Demorthens. In this video, I'm just going to go over how to cast magic and how that works. So let's get into it. The first thing we're going to go over is major and minor Oghams. So basically the art of Sigil Rann is the Demorthen art of casting magic ultimately. So the art of Sigil Rann deals with natural elements and is divided into 7 distinct major Ogham: earth, water, air, fire, vegetal, animal, and life. Each major Ogham has uncountable minor Ogham associated to it, which stem from it and are used during incantations. Each minor Ogham is linked to a particular power that can be unleashed according to 6 distinct degrees of intensity, ranging from an insignificant effect to setting the natural elements raging. According to tradition, these intensity degrees are called power circles, and I'll go over that in the chart of Sigil Rann and how to use that. Sigil Rann is basically a discipline under your Demorthen mysteries and stuff domain. And if you're interested in domains and disciplines and that doesn't make sense to you, make sure you watch the core mechanics crash course before this and character creation, because I go into domains and disciplines and that sort of stuff. So some of this other, some of this terminology will make better sense to you if you watch that first. But ultimately, yeah, you have these major Ogham, and then under each one, there's all these minor Oghams, just uncountable amounts. Each one is associated to like a different power, and you have these Ogamic stones that are associated with each minor Ogham, power that is under each major Ogham. So like you have, just as a light example, and I'm going to get into some of those powers and how that works and a little bit later. But like, let's say under air, right, you might have a bunch of minor Oghams like a hurricane or a tornado or just a light windstorm or something involving the element of air, right? And each one of those powers is associated to a minor Ogham, each one having their own Ogamic stone, which you would need in order to cast these spells. But that's the major Oghams, and that's kind of how they're associated with minor Oghams. And then each one, each spell, each minor Ogham that you're casting has different intensity levels, as it describes something that might just be like, a light wind that tickles the skin that's kind of insignificant to, a raging hurricane that just destroys everything in its path for miles. So it depends on the level of intensity or power circle within each of those minor Oghams. But let's get into that. Let's first show off. Let's talk about the Ogham stones, and then I'm going to kind of show off a little imagery so you can see what they look like, because again, I love the artwork of the book. But Ogamic stones come in the form of small polished pebbles 3 of them can easily fit in the hand, just to give you an idea of size. These are the vessels within which the Rindas, as you see, the spelling looks like Rindop, but it's pronounced Rindas. I go over that in the setting and style. Don't get hung up on the pronunciations, make it your own, don't worry about it, but there is a pronunciation guide that can help you along the way with some of these words. But ultimately, these pebbles are basically the vessels with which the Rindas energy summoned by the Demorthens accumulates. So being very resilient, they can be used as often as desired to focus this energy. Should a Demorthen attempt to use her own mortal coil to gather all the necessary energy for some invocations, her body would likely break apart or be violently altered. Each pebble is engraved with minor Ogham corresponding to a specific power, one of innumerable derivatives. Basically, just like I mentioned in the previous section, there's just uncountable amount of minor Oghams. Ogham, you can basically look at the list in the book. There's a bunch of different minor Oghams or spells right under the major Ogham categories, but you can come up with your own. There's just uncountable amounts, so you and the game leader, you as a player or as a game leader, can come up with some together or on your own, or maybe that is inspired by a particular campaign you're in. But again, just in innumerable derivatives of one of the 7 major Ogham as it's described here. For each power she wishes to use, the Demorthen will need an Oghamatic stone engraved with the corresponding symbol. When she unleashes its power, she must hold the Oghamic stone in her hand. Now, something to mention here, the Demorthen needs to find these stones. Some stones are very rare, others much more common. The list of powers presented in the manual are not exhaustive, like I said, as are uncountable derivatives of the 7 major Ogham. Again, it reiterates that fact because it's important. It's important to know that this book suggests things and gives you examples, but it's not the be-all end-all. Get creative, come up with your own. And something to keep in mind is when you start with these Oghamic stones, and let me bring up the image here just so we can check that out while I mention this, but you basically take your empathy way, and that's how many of these Oghamic stones you might start with as a beginning character in this game. But, again, you don't have to go that way. And within this chapter about Demorthen, there are some optional rules, so check that out. I might do some separate crash courses on some of those options. But yeah, another option is you can start off with more Oghamic stones, or maybe none. Maybe you want to play it out in campaigns and have them find it and grow as a character a bit more organically. But again, the set rule and the way that they suggest to start is you take your empathy way, and that's how many Oghamic stones you might start with as a character. And you just look at the different powers and major categories and see kind of what makes sense to the character to decide which ones they might start with if that's what you want to do. Let's get into the summoning chart. This Sigil Rann summoning chart works much in the way as if you saw the Magientist crash course. Those charts work when it comes to extracting and refining flux. This is very similar in the sense that you have different intensity levels. You'll see there the circles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then the difficulty threshold that corresponds to the different level of circle or intensity that you're casting within. And that's what you have to meet with your Sigil Rann discipline check. And that's Sigil Rann, you just basically need to at least be up to 6 points, at least have a point in that discipline to be able to use it. But in order to set that difficulty threshold, you're going to do it by one of these factors. You see these different factors here, how many targets you're hitting, the scale, persistency, bonus penalty, the amount of damage you're trying to deliver or heal or whatever. And you'll see that within the different minor Ogham and the different spell options or whatever, they might heal, they might cause damage. They all have their own little ways that they work and what they might do, and that'll kind of change the way that you define these different factors and how they play. But ultimately, you're going to look at the different factors. You're going to see how it corresponds to the spell you want to cast, and exactly how you're using it in the scene, in the campaign, how the character is going to use it, right, to affect other players, NPCs, or the scene or whatever. And then you're going to see which one of these factors is kind of the highest rating one, right? So like, maybe you just want to target one person, right? A 1 target, which would technically be under circle 1, just a standard 11 you'd have to beat. However, Let's say you want to cause 3d10 damage, or maybe you want the persistency to last all day. You want them to whatever it might be. You want that to last, the sickness or the whatever the spell effect is, right? In which case you would have to go all the way up to that circle 4 in order to have it last an hour or cause 3d10 damage, even though it's just one target. So you always kind of go to the max factor to determine that circle level to get your difficulty threshold you have to beat with that Sigil Rann discipline check. And then of course you have your Rindas cost, which I go over how to calculate Rindas. Every character has that. Demorthen has it within themselves. When they cast these spells, they're kind of pulling power from nature, but also from their own personal Rindas, in which case there's the cost. So you reduce that stat on your character sheet according to which you're casting and if it's successful and how much it uses. And then of course summoning time, how long it takes your character to kind of work that spell or that Ogham and make that happen. Use their Sigil Rann, the art of Sigil Rann. All right, let's get into that 6 power circle, because I do want to point out here, if you look at that 6th level, you'll see in some of those factors and cost and summoning time, all that stuff, it says special. And that's because when you get up to that heroic level, let's look at that difficulty threshold of 30, right? Heroic on the 6th circle. Yeah, you're getting up to just a new level, and it has its own chart that has its own degrees. So once you get up to that 6th circle, you have 6 degrees within that, and it can even go beyond that. But this circle is considered mythical among Demorthen, and only the wisest and most experienced among them, among their numbers, know how to concentrate enough energy to unleash powers in this intensity. So, like I said, it's a heroic difficulty threshold of 30. So you understand that it's a really experienced Demorthen, okay? And the other thing I wanted to mention about the Rindas and your power, because, you might be looking at some of those numbers and say, well, how am I ever going to afford the cost of Rindas to do any of this stuff if where I'm at is just my empathy way? Well, you can increase that. You not only recover it, and I'm going to go over that in a moment, the given Rindas that you have and within, but you can increase the total amount that your threshold of Rindas that you're within using experience points. I go over advancement and experience in a separate crash course, but you can literally use your experience points to increase your total amount of Rindas you're capable of having. And that's how you increase that, and you can basically go up levels and get more and more into higher circles, more intensity, and even into the 6th circle and higher degrees within it. But again, you see it has its own factors, cost, summoning time, all that, because once you get up to that 6th circle, you're getting down into these specific degrees. But at that point, you're working, look at the scale, you're working some of this stuff within miles. So you're not just having a gust of wind hit an enemy or something. You're maybe working a hurricane across miles of land, attacking a whole village. So once you're up to that level, you understand the power that you have at your disposal. But let's get into resisting power a bit, and then I'll get into that recovery stuff. Resisting power works in one of two ways, depending on if it's physical or mental, right? But resisting power is just basically your ability to combat whatever a Demorthen sends at you. So a living being can attempt to resist the effects of a power, being they physical or mental. The stronger the intensity of a power, the harder it will be to avoid the effects. A natural 10 is always considered a success, even if the difficulty threshold was out of the target's reach. Likewise, a natural 1 always means a failure, even if the success could have been automatic. According to each case, various characteristics can be involved, and I'll go over that right here. You can see these couple of different options here, like I said, whether it's physical or mental. You have your resisting power chart here, and that lets you know kind of the difficulty threshold based on the intensity circle of whatever's being cast, right? If it's a physical resistance, you're trying to withstand something physical, you're going to be working off of your stamina statistics. So you're going to make a stamina roll. And it goes over details on that and how that works, and how many penalties and things you can get, so check that out. This also goes for like sleep-inducing, Ogham, being paralyzed, stuff like that. So again, check out that about physical, but there's also mental resistance versions, like some powers that attack the mind, in which case you do a mental resistance check. You use your mental resistance statistic. So you see how you can resist it, and you have a couple different ways here depending on what type of Ogham you're being hit with, right? So check that out. You know, you don't always have to take it, and you're not and keep in mind that even if you succeed in that, and you'll see when you get into the details, you're only reducing whatever's coming at you by half. So like, you're never fully able to negate a Demorthen attack if they're successful with whatever Ogham they're hitting you with. The most you can hope for is to, you know, cut that damage in half, round it up. So check that out. All the details are there. Now, the last thing that I want to mention, and I kind of mentioned it a moment ago, is recovering Reendos. Like I said, you know, there's a difference between recovering and then increasing, right? So like you have your set Reendos, you recover that in numerous ways here, either meditation or rest, and I'll go over that in just a second. But like I said, you can increase the total capacity of Reendos that the character can have using those experience points, and I go over that in the Advancement and Experience Crash Course. Here, you basically use your meditating discipline. If you don't have that, you can use your Demorthen Mysteries domain, but you meditate. You basically meditate, and for every hour that you meditate, you get a point of Reendos back. And the difficulty that you're checking against just depends on where you're meditating. Are you meditating in a Demorthen, sacred Demorthen place, or in the forest, or in a village, or in a city, or Magiantist factory? And yeah, that's just basically going to change the difficulty from 11 to 14, 17 to 20. You can see it all right there. The other way, like I said, you can rest. So overnight you can rest, and you can get 2 points of Reendos back that way. Very similar to recovering damage by resting. So there you have it. That is how and what's up with casting spells as a Demorthen. I hope that that was helpful and it makes sense to you. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments and I'll hit you back and try to help you along the way. Also, make sure you check out the deep dive on Demorthens that I launched. In that one, I go over a little more of the intricacies on why and how these spells and things work, where they come from, the history, and then different ways you can play a Demorthen and develop them to make them just unique and fun. So check out that as well. And as always, make sure you give this video a like, leave a comment, give a share, subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate the support, not just for myself, but also Cybernation Uncensored. And then, of course, for Shadows of Esteren and Studio Agate. I want to get as much exposure as possible for this game because I fucking love it, and I hope you do too. All right, I'll see you next time. Take care.
Cybernation Uncensored.